And good morning, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name's Tim Baghurst, and I'm joined this morning by Amber Fryklund, who's an associate head coach of women's ice hockey. Amber, if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, what you're doing now, and then we'll get into the fun questions.
Great. Thanks for having me this morning, Tim.
Pleasure.
Well, I grew up in northern Minnesota, and my hockey journey started as a little kid. I grew up at a time where girls hockey really wasn't popular. A lot of girls didn't play. And I started playing outside, and then I started playing boys hockey. Fortunate for me, I grew up at the right time, I would say. My high school in Minnesota, I guess the Minnesota State High School League adopted girls hockey as a sport in 1994. So I grew up at the right time. My high school adopted a team my second year in high school. And so my hockey journey really happened then. And I had a great 3 years of playing high school hockey, great experience. And then again, I grew up at the right time because women's hockey at the Division I level really started to take off. And so when I was finishing high school, there were opportunities to play college hockey. And so I ended up playing at Bemidji State University. So I played Division I hockey for my career. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. I never realized that you could be a collegiate coach for a profession. I mean, never realized that was a thing. I didn't see it growing up. And so when I got into the athletic world and realized that was something that you could do, it was very intriguing to me and something that I wanted to aspire to. So I went to school at Bemidji State to become a teacher and a coach. I got a teaching job and coaching job right after college. And so I spent 8 years as a physical education and health teacher while coaching girls high school hockey in Minnesota, and also coached a little bit of tennis and coached a little bit of golf at that time, and had great experiences doing those things. And then I got the job at Bemidji State as an assistant coach 9 years ago. So I just finished my ninth year. I spent 5 years as an assistant, and I spent 4 as the associate head coach. And I'm in the process of making the transition from coaching to a faculty position. During my last 9 years, I've had a lot of great experiences at the college level and higher education, and really had an interest in pursuing a doctorate degree. And so I started that and finished last year. It's just about a year ago that I defended my dissertation. And so there was an opportunity in our department at Bemidji State in the Human Performance, Sport and Health Department as an assistant professor. And so I decided to make that next step into the faculty position. So I'll be making that transition this summer and starting my teaching this fall. And so that's really my journey and how I got to where I am. I'm really proud of, my experiences in athletics, and really that opportunity to play hockey, pretty much changed my life and got me to where I am today.
Now you were a school teacher and coach, and it was interesting that you're coaching tennis and golf, which are completely unrelated to ice hockey in many ways. Mm-hmm. What was it that made you want to leave that kind of teaching position and move into collegiate coaching?
Yeah, again, like I said earlier, when I grew up, you never realized that you could be a collegiate coach. And so I was very interested to, it was kind of a dream job to have the opportunity to coach where you played and be involved that way. And so that opportunity, when it came along, I had a really great teaching job. I loved what I did. I was at a great school, but I wanted that next step. I wanted to coach at the Division I level, and so it's one of the best decisions I made, and really worked out well for me.
When you talk about being an associate head coach, you didn't get hired as an associate head coach. You were hired as an assistant. So what are the differences, at least in your experiences, between being an assistant versus being an associate?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I first got hired as an assistant, it was really a learning process. I mean, I would say the biggest challenge for me was learning about NCAA rules and recruiting. And so, I would say the head coach I worked for at the time gave me a lot of responsibilities. And so I was really fortunate to have the opportunity to do things that a head coach would do, whether it's working on budgets, just all sorts of, aspects that a head coach does, making decisions, those types of things. And so really set me up for success and just really learned a lot. And so, when I was promoted, it didn't really change my job responsibilities at all. It really just gave me the opportunity to have, that promotion and really lead me to, the next step. But it didn't really change the day-to-day things that I did. It didn't change really how I interacted with players. It's just really, making that next step for me in my career.
Now, if I heard you correctly, you said that coach at the time.
Yes.
Which means that you survived a change in coach.
Yes.
What that experience was like.
Yeah, I've worked for 2 head coaches. Steve Serdich was the coach when I first got hired. He, great guy. And he took a chance on me. I didn't have any college coaching experience, obviously. So, worked for him, learned a lot from him, and then went through a coaching change when he retired from coaching. And then our head coach currently, Jim Scanlon, didn't have to keep me when he got hired, but here I am 6 years later. So, I was really fortunate to work with 2 coaches that, that supported me in my role.
I suspect that was a pretty stressful time, though, having that transition of, do I have a job? Don't I have a job?
Of course. Yeah. It's always, yeah. And, as coaches, you don't have lifetime contracts, right? So you're at the mercy of making sure that you're doing the right things and making sure you have a great culture in your program and all those types of things. But yeah, it's been a great 9 years. Again, coaching somewhere where you play it is really special.
You talked about being an assistant. You talked about being an associate. Did you ever have ambitions to be a head coach?
I certainly did. That was always my goal. Again, never realizing that you could be a college coach for a living. So yeah, it was my aspiration. I wanted to be a head coach. And actually my dissertation is about female head coaches, women's ice hockey in particular. I have a lot of interest in how Title IX changed women's sports. And from, most people know this, but before Title IX, 90% of women coached women's sports. And today it's about 42%. And so through my experiences, I had a really big interest in learning more about that. There's a lot of research out there about this topic. And so I really looked at women's college hockey and head coaches. And so the challenges with my aspirations of being a women's Division I hockey coach is that there's only 35 programs in the country. And so there's only 35 jobs. And so those are the challenges of having that aspiration. I've interviewed for some head coaching positions and obviously didn't get them, but I've learned so much along the way. I learned so much about myself, what my goals and aspirations are. Through those experiences, I think everything happens for a reason. But yeah, I just have a lot of interest in that area. Making the transition from faculty, obviously that means that I'm not in coaching anymore. So, and the fortunate thing for me is that I love teaching and I love coaching. And so making that transition, while it was a hard decision because I love coaching and what I do, I also love teaching. And I think that opportunity to have an impact on students, just like you do as a coach, you have the opportunity to have a bigger impact with the students that you interact with every day.
And we've got a question coming for you from the chat box, but just before we move on to that, what did you find in your dissertation? And do you know what the percentage of female head coaches are in ice hockey?
Yeah. So there's 35 programs, and there at the time, the year that I did my study, there was 10 female coaches at the time. And so, if you look historically, again, women's hockey, particularly before the NCAA adopted it, there was a lot of teams out on the East Coast. A lot of programs had teams, but when the NCAA adopted women's ice hockey in about 2000, you can see there was a lot of women that coach women's teams. But then when it became an NCAA sport, you can kind of see how the decline kind of mirrored what the overall decline of women's sport is. So at the time, again, there was 10. And what I found, there's no earth-shattering, answers that I found. It was really looking at those women's experiences and their roles and how they got to be a head coach. And really it was about, they all played hockey. They all had female role models. As far as some of the participants had female head coaches in college, and just the relationships that they maybe had with other female coaches and how impactful that was. And then the opportunities that you have as a female coach to inspire female athletes to become coaches. I found that was very interesting. So no earth-shattering answers. I wish I found the answer to increase women coaches, but certainly some insight in how we can continue to grow women coaches, empower female athletes if they have an interest in coaching to get into coaching. And then how can we get more female head coaches in the game?
Well, we do have a question for you from the chat box. And if you're just joining us, if you have a question for Amber, be sure to put it in your chat box. We'll get it to her. Jim Douglas, a big fan of the show. Thanks, Jim, for watching. Ice hockey is tough on the legs. How do you avoid overtraining legs to ensure they're fresh and ready to go at all times?
Well, that's a good question. And I am very fortunate to work at a school that we have strength and conditioning coaches. So we leave that to their hands. I try to not get too involved, but we have great support staff. And then obviously, I would say it's very interesting when I was an athlete, we did a lot of skating and a lot of conditioning, you would call it. And in today's game, really every drill we do in practice, and in practice, it's at a high tempo and pace. And so we really try to, talk about conditioning our athletes to get them game ready as much as we can in practice to mimic a game. But then on the off ice part, really trusting our strength coaches to make sure that they're ready to go. And then also just having conversations with our athletes. How your legs feeling today? Certainly after we play 2 games, women's ice hockey works how we typically play 2 games on a weekend. So you play Friday and Saturday, and Monday it's how you're feeling today, how are your legs feeling, and just gauging it by that as well.
Another question came in. Jake wants to know, have there been any women's hockey programs dropped since COVID-19 closings?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Do you think that in some ways, something like women's ice hockey is a little more protected than perhaps a male sport, given the Title IX rulings?
I'm not an expert in that, but possibly, it possibly could be. Again, I'm not sure. We have had a women's hockey program dropped. University of North Dakota dropped their program, but that was not due to COVID-19. That was about 3 to 4 years ago. But yeah, I'm not really sure to answer that question. I don't have the specific backgrounds in that.
Are you seeing it growing, or is it just kind of staying the same in terms of who has a program? Yeah,
it's stayed pretty the same for quite a while. You see a little bit more growth on the Division III side. There's some programs that have been adding, so you see a little bit more growth there.
When you look at ice hockey in general, it can be an expensive sport because you have to have a specific arena with specific conditions, and that tends to lend itself to the north for obvious reasons. But fundraising, I imagine, is a big part of what you do as a coaching program. How do you fundraise for a program like yours?
Yeah, you're right. We do a variety of different things. Specifically, we have great community support. We do things within our program, dollar a goal, locker sponsors, things like that. But we're not raising millions of dollars.
Right.
We're doing the best we can to support our program in small ways, but certainly playing our part and making sure that we not only fundraise, but also making sure that we just involve our community members and things like that. We were a part of a golf event last year with our university, reviving an old women's golf event. So just trying to find creative ways that to raise money in any way we can to support, what we're doing.
And recruiting is also it's a challenge for every coach, right? Trying to get the best player and the best fit of a player into your program. You're not, as a program, you're not kind of the national champions every year where everybody wants to come to your program. So what kind of strategies do you use in recruiting? How do you choose who to go look at, for example? And then what tips do you have for ensuring that somebody gets into your program as opposed to going to maybe a competitor down the road?
Yeah, recruiting is obviously one of the most important things as a Division I coach. What's interesting is 9 years ago when I first started, we were looking at seniors still and doing visits. And today, our rules have changed a bit in the last 2 years, but there was a while that we were looking at 8th graders. So it's really changed a lot. But, one of the challenges and particularly of our school and where we're at in our league, the WCHA, is our league consists of teams that are Big Ten schools. So Ohio State, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and other schools in our league like the University of Minnesota, Duluth, St. Cloud, Mankato. We're the smallest school in our league, and so we have those challenges as other schools do as well, as to recruit players. But we've been really fortunate in our program. We know who we are as a university. We sell that we're a small school, and that environment that we have here, we really sell that. We had a lot of Canadians on our team when I first came in, and really Minnesota for girls hockey is a hotbed, and so our roster has kind of changed a little bit over the course of the years. But certainly we go everywhere. We go everywhere that we can find players, everywhere and anywhere, looking for players and the players that are going to fit our program the best. And really, our philosophy has always been we want players that want to come to Bemidji State University. So wherever it is that we go to tournaments, we watch players all over. And then just having those conversations, getting to know student athletes and making sure that they're a right fit for our culture. They're obviously a skilled hockey player, good person first, obviously, and then obviously they got to be a good student as well.
Do you, as a program, are you, I guess the word forced to play schools that may be out of your league in order to generate revenue, like a football team would do, where you go to a powerhouse for essentially the paycheck, and who knows, maybe you get a good result. Do you have to do that as well as a method for fundraising?
No, we don't, but I wish we did, because that'd be a great opportunity. But no, we don't. We have our league schedule, which we play, and then we have the opportunity to play some non-conference games. And so really we have the ability to work with other teams that we have interested, or they have interest in playing us. Yeah.
How do you work out those non-conference games? How do you decide who you play?
Yeah, you have a certain amount of games that after the conference schedule that you have open. And so it's always been a challenge with logistics with other leagues and their conference schedules. And so it's complicated, but it's just having conversations with other programs. And typically you do like a 2-year cycle where you play someone at home 1 year and then you go there and play them the next year. So it kind of changes every 2 years. But really it's just having conversations with coaches. Women's hockey with 35 teams is a pretty small community. So everyone kind of knows each other and is able to have those conversations. Now,
without trying to be critical, if you look at the ice hockey record, you're not, as I mentioned, those kind of national championship winning teams. You're kind of one of the mid-level teams where every game is a battle and really determines whether you have a winning season or not. And I think that's an important thing to talk about, because it's easy to talk to guests who always are successful, whose teams win time and time again, but a lot of us are under 500 when we compete. And so I'm curious, how do you motivate athletes and even yourself when you know that every season is going to be a battle in order to be successful?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, there's no doubt every year.
And I apologize for it, but I want to know as well.
No, it is. It's a great question. But yeah, every year, that's your goal. You want to be a national champion. You want to win championships, whether it's your conference championship or a national championship. And we've had years here that that our record hasn't been great, and we've had years that we've had a better record. But I think ultimately it comes down to is creating an environment that your players love. And so, we always talk about focusing on the process, not focusing on the outcome of winning, but what is the process of getting there, and what kind of things can we do together as a team to make sure that we create an environment that players feel good about it, win or lose. And I think that's really have been the key. I think some of the greatest moments are in sport that we have sometimes aren't always just the wins, but it's the relationships that you have. It's the seasons that you have with your friends as a team, and the challenges maybe you overcome, and the things that you learn, and those lifelong friendships. And so I really, really firmly believe that as a coach is trying to provide, and it's never going to be perfect, right? But providing an environment that's fun, exciting, where players feel like they're growing, they're getting better, really focused on that process. And you hope at the end of that process that you're going to win games at the end. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. But I've been really proud of the progress we've made in our program. When I first played here to now, it's been great. And not only the product on the ice, but the bigger picture of just women's hockey in general, the fan support, just the community support, and then the culture that we have within our program. Consistently every year, our student athletes are really making great strides in the classroom and being at the top of our league with scholar athletes. Just really proud of that. And just the players that we have here and the hard work they do in our community. It's just been I've been really proud of it. So, to answer your question, I think it's a combination of a lot of different things, of focusing just on that process instead of just focusing on winning all the time.
Now, I have students who come into my program who want to be a coach and, see the superstars on TV and think, well, I can do that too, because I've done it in the stands already. They don't necessarily know the realities of coaching, and they've not been in the trenches and understand that things aren't always easy. I wonder if you could share maybe one or two experiences where you've been challenged, where you've struggled as a coach, to kind of share that this isn't always the easy job that it can sometimes look like.
Yeah, certainly. I think you're right. There are challenges. It's a great gig, and coaching certainly has so many rewards. But I would say, decision making is probably one of the challenges. And when players aren't playing and you have to choose a lineup, and players are disappointed because they want to play. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that maybe I've experienced, and just seeing that how that can wear on a person, because you want everyone to feel valued, and you want everyone to play and participate. And so I think that's a big challenge, just from a coach, and having a heart and wanting the best for players. So I think that's that challenge. And then I would say just, the lifestyle of a coach. It's 24/7. And so you have to be ready to make those sacrifices. In the summertime, in particular, our sport is a heavy recruiting time. So when I was a teacher at the K-12 level, you had your summers off, and then you make the transition to be a college coach. And a lot of times, you're recruiting all summer. But in the same sense, that experience and the people that you meet, and the coaches that you meet, and the connections that you have, you develop lifelong friendships. And so a lot of those opportunities for recruiting are also an opportunity to see friends and to have those interactions and to learn from other people. But yeah, there's certainly challenges. It's not always easy. Obviously recruiting, you'll recruit someone that you really want in your program, and then they'll say no. And that's always a challenge as well. But certainly, everyone as a coach understands that, as a challenges, hopefully you can take those challenges and make them opportunities, and do the best you can to overcome those challenges.
Could you maybe also give us a situation where you've had to make an ethical decision, where it's not a clear cut, well, it's obvious we need to do this? Sometimes these things happen and you have to make the best decision. Both decisions aren't exactly what you want to make. Can you give an example of something like that?
Maybe just, dealing with situations that come up within your program, and making sure that as a coach, you're making the decision for the right reason, whether it's with team rules or with student athletes that aren't living up to the culture that you create. It's really about making sure you're fair and consistent with decisions that you make. And I think ultimately I've always had the philosophy of make the right decision for the right reasons. And so when presented with challenges, whether it's a student that maybe isn't making the best choices, really standing, your ground as a coach and knowing you're making the right decision for the right reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, my last question, and unless anyone else has any, and we'll get them in real quickly, but when you look at your coaching career, and you've been an assistant and associate head coach for a long time now, we have people coming up who maybe want to advance in the coaching career or even get into coaching. What kind of advice would you offer them?
Yeah, I would say be yourself. I know that sometimes when you first get a coaching position, you're finding your way, but just be yourself. Know what your values are, know what's important to you, and really live that. And then learn as much as you can. I have to say, in the last 2 months during this COVID situation, I've had the opportunity to do so many professional development opportunities. Mm-hmm. And I've learned more this spring than I have in my 9 years in other springs. And so I've just really enjoyed listening to other coaches. The NHL Coaches Association did some different professional development opportunities, and some of our women coaches were able to present, and they were just phenomenal. They rocked it out of the park, but it was just great information and something that I just learn from other coaches any chance you get. Whether you're a student athlete and you're interested in coaching, take the opportunity to talk to your coaches about that. Work camps, I guess, in general. I'm thinking hockey terms right now, but work camps, get the opportunity to have those conversations with coaches and learn as much as you can. But I've really enjoyed the opportunities I've had this spring to learn. So I'd say learn as much as you can, be a sponge, ask questions. And I think networking with other coaches is really important. Get to know other people, their stories, what you can learn from them.
Well, you transitioned that in very nicely. If somebody does want to network with you and has questions, what's the best way they can reach you?
Yeah, email is a great way. I think my email's there on the screen. Email is a great opportunity to get in touch with me.
Well, Amber, thank you so much for spending a few minutes to talk to us and share a little bit of your wisdom. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me today.
My pleasure. Just a reminder, coming up next week, Tim Rice will be joining us on Tuesday. He is a basketball coach, international coach, also coaches in the U.S. as well, and is also a professor. So we'll be talking a little bit about all kinds of things. Hope you join us for that one. It's going to be very interesting, I promise. On behalf of myself, though, Tim Baghurst and Amber Fryklund, thank you so much for watching.